I'm playing phone tag with State Representative Brian Zollinger, trying to call him as he's trying to call me. So what we'll do is we'll get him on the line with us in just a moment. This is called hot call, but I am expecting his telephone call. But we wanted to point out we're talking this morning with a representative. He was one of the leaders in that group that filed a lawsuit after Governor Butch Otter vetoed the vote by both houses of the legislature for the repeal of the grocery tax, sales tax in Idaho. And the argument had been he didn't do it before the 10-day deadline is specified in the state constitution, that it actually took him 12 days. Otter's response was, no, it's only 10 days after it reaches my desk, and he cited an obscure ruling from 1978. We've had a very strange court ruling come down. And from what I'm reading in this, and the representative will explain this in just a moment, from what I'm reading in all of this, the court said yes, the ruling essentially set aside the 1978 ruling, which you would think favored the legislators, but apparently said that at this time they'll just let it go, and in future issues, they would side against the governor making such a decision. We're joined by Representative Zollinger. I'm doing this on faith, by the way.
It is me. Good morning, Bill.
I was trying to call you as you were trying to call me, and sometimes those wires get crossed. Thank you, and welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I appreciate you having me on again. It's always a pleasure.
I had referenced this to you yesterday, that this is a very confusing decision, and then somebody else who was watching our conversation on Facebook, because I'm going to point out, the Democrats didn't get involved on board with the lawsuit, but deep down, a lot of them were supporting it. And so somebody within the legislative, from that side of the aisle, wrote me and said they also believe that there's some typos in the ruling, which makes it even more confusing. Overall, what do you think's going on here?
It is a crazy decision. As an attorney, I have to side with Justice Jones's dissent. Obviously, that's the way I wanted it to come out. But, I was happy that they overturned the Santa Rosa decision and brought back a plain meaning to the Constitution. In the decision, they say we're not supposed to practice judicial activism and legislate from the bench. And then in the next paragraph, they do, in my interpretation, exactly that. They once again legislate from the bench by interpreting Article 4, Section 10 of the Constitution to say that all bills have to be presented to the governor from the legislature before sine die, or they're null and void. A practice that's been going on for 50 years is that after we adjourn, the House leadership or the clerk will get the bills to the governor a day or so after sine die, after we adjourn for the year. And so, Justice Jones in the dissent says, well, we shouldn't practice judicial activism, but here they go, they've done it. There's nothing in Article 4, Section 10 that says what they're saying. They're interpreting this. What I thought was even stranger is that they go back and look to what they consider the framers' intent regarding the Constitution, and they look at what was called the Idaho Organic Act. And that's kind of like the United States Supreme Court saying, we're going to interpret the Constitution of the United States by going back and looking at the Articles of Confederation. The state Constitution replaced the Organic Act, so it's a really strange decision. You're right.
And the possibility of typos, would that have any impact in the overall decision, or would that just be something they'd have to clean up?
That's just something they can clean up. There are court rules that allow them to just go in and correct any clerical errors, so they could fix that.
I wouldn't want to, because most people in the judiciary, they're working pretty. I don't want to impugn anybody's motives, but the fact that they would essentially put together a ruling and say, well, the governor was wrong, but this time we're going to let it go. I don't know. From a public view, this is the thing. You don't want to give the public any ammunition or the image that perhaps they were ruling in favor of their friend, in other words. And I don't think that's what's going on here, but there's a public perception's a dangerous thing when we start going down this road.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think, we're blessed to have a fairly good Supreme Court and justices who I think, and they all say they want to be strict constructionalists and interpret the Constitution by its plain meaning. And so I think that's good there. And this was a tough case for them. Probably they're still human, and I think they really tried to split the baby on this one. And unfortunately, in the end, the only losers are the Idaho taxpayers, who are now going to continue to pay 6% on groceries, a basic necessity. And so, it's disheartening, but there were good things in the decision. And yeah, that's really what I think they tried to do here. They overthought it rather than interpret the plain meaning. Once again, they went back to and tried to divine what the framers meant by this, when there's no language whatsoever in there that says we have to present bills before sine die. And really, again, the losers are the taxpayers, unfortunately.
It reminds me a little bit of some of those. There's some legal scholars that I hear about every once in a while who say that we should use some international law in making some of our own decisions in this country. And I've been hearing this chatter for 10 or 15 years and hasn't gone anywhere yet. But it's that almost same sort of philosophy that, well, we're going to bring this in and bring this in and look at this, as you say, overthinking it when they have the document in front of them that pretty makes it clearly spelled out.
Yeah, it is. I think you're right again. And it's scary when you hear people. My feeling is we have the greatest country on the earth, and our legal system, our Constitution, is the greatest. So it's sad to hear when people want to bring outside law in, but that's kind of what this is. Again, the judiciary, we're supposed to have co-equal branches, but really what we have in this country right now is, whether it's the executive branch or the legislative branch, the judicial branch seems to rule by fiat. They can tell us what those laws mean, even if that's not what they were supposed to mean. It's they get the final say on that. I think it's unfortunate. Representative Giddings sent me a quote from Thomas Jefferson the other day, and I can't find it in front of me, but basically he said, the Constitution is something to be played with by the judiciary, and basically warning people that the judiciary can have more power than it's supposed to have if we're not vigilant. And unfortunately, I think that's true.
We want to point out to the folks listening this morning, we're joined by State Representative Brian Zollinger. We're at 9:13, and it's 72. Bill Cowley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Now, on the other side of this, Representative, we have the knowledge that we're likely going to go back into session come January, and this thing is going to pass very, very quickly. And no matter what happens at that point, there's an override of the governor's veto if he would decide again that would be the decision he would make. And of course, his most likely successors all seem to be in favor of what you're doing as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's promising that all three major gubernatorial candidates have said they support the repeal of the grocery tax. And I think you're right. I think that should be first on our agenda when we reconvene in January, is getting the grocery tax passed through. I'd like to see a more broad tax relief proposed. Maybe get the income tax rates down or increase the thresholds that now set. I mean, everyone that makes over $10,000 basically is in the highest tax bracket in the state. So I'd like to see more overall tax relief, but the grocery tax should be first on our list. I imagine it will be. I hope that there's no more gamesmanship, which caused this to be at the end of the session last time, just gamesmanship between the Senate and the House leadership, which is absolutely ridiculous. So this should be one of our first items. I think it will be. I think, obviously it's got broad bipartisan support. As far as leadership, I think the only leader in the House that was against this was Scott Bedke, if I remember right, was the only one that voted against the grocery tax repeal. So I think it's going to come forward and it's going to happen. And I heard Representative Nate the other day say he dares the governor to repeal this if we pass it, because we do have a supermajority, and we will again have a supermajority. It's what the people want, and that's what we're going to give the people.
Speaking of going back into session, I don't mean to jump topics here, but when you brought this up, Randy Staples and I were talking the other day, and he was pointing out that with some of maybe it's more, the impact will be greater in the Senate, but what we're seeing is really a changing of the guard in leadership. And we had people saying, well, the number of these Liberty legislators and your effort to put together a Liberty caucus similar to what they have in Washington, where people say, oh, their numbers are limited, but the numbers went from 1 to 2 to 7 to really 30, and all in a very short period of weeks to months. We could be seeing coming up this next session and then the following session some tremendous sea change in the legislative process and who really is controlling it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, right away, you can just say you've got Senator Hagedorn and Senator Bart Davis that are gone. On the House side, you have long-term Representatives Kelly Packer that is gone. Eric Redmond announced the other day that he's gone, so we know of some turnover. And I think you're right. Whether they're called Liberty legislators or just legislators that I feel are honoring the Republican Party platform that we all campaign on. And so I think that's why you see that we had 30 of us join the lawsuit, and whether they're all members of the Idaho Freedom Caucus, ultimately, I think they will be. And our entire goal will just be to follow the Republican Party platform. And I think that's the difference right now is there are several that are following it, and a lot of people that campaign on that platform have kind of lost their way. I'm also hoping that the more our numbers grow, I do think a lot of those representatives will come back around and realize that that's what the people want. They want us to follow the platform, which, that is drafted by the people, drafted by the precinct committee offices that are elected by their neighbors in small groups, and they draft that party platform. And it's our job as legislators to honor the people's wishes, and that's all the Liberty Caucuses or the Idaho Freedom Caucus is about. And I think I don't want to say a changing of the guard, because I think we're just going to all come around and together we've almost reached critical mass and starting to follow this platform and honor the state constitution.
We've got about a minute to go. When you bring that up, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll grab a telephone caller because we can stretch this out if we need to. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Representative Brian Zollinger. Go ahead.
Hi. I agree that no one likes to pay taxes, higher taxes or taxes on food or anything like this. But where are you going to make up this income that you're taking away to support our state? I haven't seen that brought up. It seems like some of these taxes are the only fair way to build that revenue for the state is those that have more pay more in taxes because they buy more.
Well, on that note, I'll tell you what. Thank you for the call, and what we'll do is we've only got about 30 seconds before the break. Representative, if you can spare us another 5 minutes after the break, we can get to her question. And I have a couple more, too, as well, since we've been talking. The interesting thing about a conversation like this is I start out with one premise, and then when I'm listening to the guest, I said, gee, maybe this needs to be addressed, and this and this and this. So we'll take a short break, and we can respond to her question coming up in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. I'd be glad to.
State Representative Brian Zollinger joining us this morning, and caller brings up an interesting question. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. Right now, it's 71, and we'd like to thank you for joining us this morning on Top Story with Bill Cawley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And, of course, if you've got a question, too, as well for the representative, telephone number 736-0300, 736-0300. Be patient, though. I'm not quite sure how long this break is, but we don't want you just dangling out there in space. Our guest is State Representative Brian Zollinger, and he was among the leaders of the group of legislators. There were 30 of them before it was done, who brought a lawsuit against the governor following the governor's veto. And both houses of the legislature had overwhelmingly supported this notion, and it was both sides of the aisle as well, of repealing the sales tax on groceries. The court case came down, and it was a strange decision. It favored the governor, but pretty much said in the future it would not favor a governor's decision when it comes down to the amount of time a governor has to veto a particular bill. Caller just chimed in a couple of minutes ago and asked, and it was a good question, if you remove this sales tax from groceries, you've got two choices, really. You've got to find another source of revenue, or you have to keep trimming spending. And some people out there say that there may not be a whole heck of a lot to trim. Representative, I guess the question has come up before, and I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it.
It's not, and it's an excellent question, and a multiple-part answer. One, we would not have to replace this lost revenue. Two things. One, last year we grew government and spent 10% more than we did the past year. So we grew government we spent $340 million last year over the prior year. Secondly, we have the Amazon tax. We just got the year-end numbers a week or two ago, and we are almost $100 million above the forecast for that. So we revenue growth was about 8.3%, almost a full $100 million above the 5.4% forecast. The grocery tax would have cost maybe, ballpark $50 million. So we'll have a surplus next year. So there's nothing to replace. We have plenty of tax money in the state of Idaho. The problem is every time we have a surplus like this, we just spend more, we grow government more, rather than give the people these tax breaks. So the money's there. It wouldn't be hard to replace it at all.
I was going to say, and with the state expecting a boon with all of the tourism and rental taxes when people come into a town for the eclipse. I saw this story at Boise Weekly where it said the state is telling homeowners if you run out of room, you still have to collect the tax, as if somehow there's going to be a cop on every corner enforcing that.
Right.
In your neck of the woods, it's going to be very crowded because up in eastern Idaho, that's the prime viewing area. But I just don't think the state's going to be able to enforce any issue like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough for them to do, and yeah, no doubt. I think it'll be great for the state. The state's in good shape, and so now's the perfect time to give people a tax cut. All the extra revenue that we're receiving, there's no reason not to do it now. I mean, and if we want to stay competitive, most tax studies, if you look at for business friendliness, almost every one of our surrounding states have lower income tax rates, no corporate tax in several of the states, no tax on groceries. Idaho is just not going to be competitive very long if we don't fix our tax structure. She also mentioned something about the rich paying, she didn't phrase it as their fair share, but she's basically said, where else are we going to get the money is from the rich. But I think people don't realize that in Idaho, if you make over, I think it's about $11,000, you're considered rich. You're in the very top tax bracket. So I think it's time for fixing that. And with like you said, the tourism, everything that we're going to get this summer, I think it's a perfect time for all of these tax cuts: the grocery tax, the corporate income tax, and reducing income taxes altogether. So,
as I understand it, Idaho only has one billionaire, and he's in your neck of the woods.
He is Mr. Vandersloot, and he does great things for the community over here.
At 9:25,
good to have him.
9:25 right now, and our guest is Brian Zollinger. He's a state representative, and we're at 71 on Top Story this morning with Bill Colley. One thing that may happen, because as we were pointing out, the ranks, your Freedom Caucus, and then those Liberty legislators, and the two groups have worked somewhat well together, but is that they don't like being called the establishment Republicans, but as your side grows, it almost we're going to see more negotiation just among Republicans on a lot of issues as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think whether it's establishment or Liberty legislators, we're all Republicans. We agree on 99% of the issue. It's the 1% of the issues that we disagree that get all the attention. But I think there will be a more agreement. Like I said, if we base our votes and what we do on what the people want, which to me, if you're running as a Republican, you're running on the Republican Party platform, which is put together at the precinct level by people that are involved, that get elected by, sometimes 100 of their neighbors. I mean, that's as grassroots as it gets. And these people give us a document every year. The state convention's coming up where they'll propose rule changes. The people vote on that platform every year. And if we follow that, I think automatically you become what people have labeled Liberty legislatures, because that's all we're doing. We are following the platform that the people give us. And there's a lot of metrics out there that measure people's scores based on that. If you look at, for instance, I know establishment people cringe when you say Idaho Freedom Foundation, but their metric, if you'll compare the 12 things that they put in their metric, it is almost word for word what the Republican Party platform stands for. So I think as we reach critical mass on the number of legislators ready to follow the platform, a lot of the establishment people, if you want to call them that, will come around and realize you're right. That's what a Republican is.
Got about just under 2 minutes. I'm going to try to squeeze in a very quick question. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air with Representative Zollinger. Caller, go ahead.
Good morning. What about our roads? Are we going to get our roads fixed?
Yeah, we are. It's if you drive up and down the I-15 corridor or anywhere else, that's in my neck of the woods here, is the big one. And, construction is going on everywhere. I think we're in good shape there. Unfortunately, fortunately for the roads, I guess, we passed $300 million in Garvey bonds to steal some more from our kids and grandkids to pay for our roads. But there's money being put towards the roads, which is a good thing. And so they are going to be fixed. There's plenty there to do that. And I think if we're more careful going forward with our budgeting, the money's there without raising the gas tax or the Garvey bonds. For instance, a statistic I love to quote is, if we had only grown government at the same rate as the other 49 states, we wouldn't have had to have passed the Garvey bonds. We would have had a surplus of $300 million last year to be able to pay for those roads without Garvey bonds. So all we have to do is keep our growth, and that's not growing at all. That's growing it at the same pace as the other 49 states, which is about 5%. So the money's there for these roads. We just need to be careful as a legislature going forward that we prioritize our spending, and infrastructure and roads has to be one of those top priorities.
Representative, I want to thank you for your time today, and of course something exciting will come up again soon. So your cousin, by the way, says you do have to come by and say hello.
I'd love to. I need to get down to the studio one time and say hi.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me. It's a great show. Great service you do for the community, Bill.
Well, thank you. Check's in the mail.
Thanks.
All right, take care. State Representative Brian Zollinger joining us this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com at 71. One more half hour of the program is coming up. Gosh, I hate to say it. We got to reference a couple things about the President of the United States. You don't get through a show any longer without doing that. I was saying the other day that I've reached the point of fatigue with that story and many of the stories surrounding him. And I just read yesterday where another radio talk show host back in the Southeast said the same thing. Well, it's worthwhile, I guess, to bring it up. That's on the way before we wrap up the program.